Uh, so today we have a lecture of Dr. Neeraj Kumar from NLU Delhi, and he will deliver lecture on legal pluralism conceptual dimensions. So we are not aware about many of the conceptual framework of legal pluralism. So today sir will deal on those issues. So welcome you, sir. So I will expect not many of the protection because this kind of jobs are not to outsource my talk, not speak a lot of social elements. But this is not a kind of classical lecture kind of idea. Feel free to ask. Don't hesitate in asking for this question. That can be perfectly unhelpful. Ask anything. Because of the fact that my endeavor is to actually, and this is not new, although in India, that is sad to realize that in India still we are actually trapped in the colonial times, not realizing. So that is not new. From you can say that way, the basic idea of legal pluralism in the modern sense also was its origins to India because of 1772 regulation. Clearly recognized the possibility of legal of British period actually said that with respect to Mohammedan, certain Mohammedan laws in that time, with respect to Muslims. So India was experiencing legal pluralism right from but the modern, even modern ideas can see. So far as the other ideas, specific situations are considered, I will talk about that in my subsequent talk. But today I will talk about the basic idea of legal pluralism. So, as Derrida famously said, that is, concepts are supposed to be understood in context. Always count in mind. Any concept makes sense only if you understand against what you are understanding. So that way, the binary of legal pluralism is legal centralism. So when we try to understand what is legal pluralism, we try to posit it against what we call as legal centralism from in spite of many of the countries realizing other way. So what is a legal centralism idea and what it actually means? So legal centralism, as the name itself reflects, it gives a kind of, it creates a very centralized kind of structure. Now, once you create a centralized structure in a modern kind of nation state idea, it will be quite obvious it will be state centric. So, and it's a product of what we can call as a kind of not much of intellectual discourse, which originated from bourgeois class and liberalism. That is also very interesting to maybe for other time, but for a food for thought. Not necessarily liberal arguments always result to liberal values. Okay? Many times liberal argument as a result into not illiberalism. This being one legal centralism. So this has been a byproduct of that kind of where the state is starting becoming very central to all this. So all this treaty of Australia and all this thing. Where so it created a kind of structure which state became quite important. So in that way, legal centralism actually gives utmost importance to the state. What it will mean that institutions which are state-created institutions will have a dominant role to play. Normativity would get created by the state, and everything will have to be tested on the touchstone of ideas which are generating from state. Now, legal pluralism, although legal pluralism is a uh, kind of a counter idea, but within itself, legal pluralism is not also a monolithic idea. So, as is the case with the steps, legal pluralism also be understood. One is what we can call the weak form of legal. It's called as strong form of legal. But please understand that as we say that there has to be a kind of epistemology of a particular idea, and also all the hermeneutics is the idea which both raises this origin to find. Peter Bennett has also attained setting. Next. One of the folly which most of the people end up coming to when they try to delve in legal pluralism, and then that's why they find it that you try to look into kind of understanding of legal pluralism from epistemology of ideas which are attuned to us or has originated because of idea of legal certainty. And if you actually test it everything and see it from that lens, you will have a tainted wisdom, and then you won't be able to appreciate legal pluralism. So, given another example, that is in the context of secularism and all this. So you know that religion has a kind of different epistemology, and then maybe science has a different. So if you try to understand religion through the epistemology of the science, you won't be able to understand it. Okay? And that is the mistake which most of the people end up committing, maybe because of again effect of Renaissance. That is, unless until something is declared as a science, it is not worth study. Okay, so it's like even astrology. Astrology is different from astrology. So they also try to understand astrology from the lens of science. Okay. And then you fail miserably. For example, they say that one of the justifications they always find that many people end up reading stores and all this. Not kgs, grams. And the justification that they give for all this is that it will conduct something raise and it will do something good to you. And then you try to understand this through science. And you will fail miserably because then the scientist will say stone and wood are not connected. So stone and wood are quite connected, how rays will go through stone and wood. Okay. So the same kind of idea. So if you try to understand through faith, okay, then it would be easy to understand. Okay, because religion is about faith, it is not about science. The same is the case with legal pluralism and legal centrism. We'll have to understand this first. That is, we are not supposed to understand legal pluralism through the ideas of legal centralism. That state is very important, state-centric, everything is there. And again, this is something, again, at the onset, I will quote one statement of, and I will also urge you, of course, since I don't use PowerPoint and my lecture won't be that much structured because I deal with ideas. So, but I will give you some kind of reading, talk about certain readings in advance, I must. So if anybody is interested, can go further look into. So for legal pluralism, you should look into Brand Tamanna's writing. You should look into Warner Minsky's writing. And you should look into Griffith's writing. So it will give you a basic idea. There are not many people who are writing on legal pluralism, and it will give you a basic idea that what are the discourses around legal pluralism. How we have to, some of this I will be using. So I will use one statement of calendar to actually highlight that what issues are there. So I quote, Calendar says, repeated rediscovery of other hemisphere of legal world of the fact that law in modern society is plural rather than monolithic, that it is private as well as public in character, and that the national public official legal system is often a secondary rather than a primary source of regulation. So there's something which is important to understand. We generally assume that is in certain cases as if all regulations are supposed to derive strength through state institution and all this kind of thing. Nothing can be far from reality. There are multiple institutions, they operate at the same time on an individual. It's not only the state institution which operates. Rather, more often than not, we don't realize, but if you'll actually see through it, and more so if you're reading the literatures which are coming from legal anthropology, rather than pure politics, the idea of law, you'll realize that multiple institutions of the society work on the individual in modern context. There is no society. So this idea, that is when legal centralism says that everything has to be state-centric, you tend to ignore all other institutions of the society which operates on the individual. The church. The church here doesn't mean church literally, church means the religious institution, okay? Or family, or for that matter, guilds and all this kind of thing. They have a huge influence. So as a matter of fact, even if you look into secular activities, like say mercantile activities, as a matter of fact, that Negotiable Instrument Act creates a law which although I'm not a great fan of acts, but as a matter of fact, it has created a law which has converted a civil transaction into a criminal act. Okay? Despite of all this, you just go and see all negotiable instrument courts. They are just burdened with all this. Nothing is done. Practically nothing. At the same time, there are mercantile guilds. They just sign something and they are honored. Okay? Because of the fact that you belong to a particular group, you belong to a particular ordering, and there are norms which you are supposed to follow if you want to be accepted as part and parcel of that party. So that is also important to understand. That is, we have to look for a co-intensive idea. That is, rather than an exclusive idea. That is, only if there is an ordering and all this kind of thing. So this kind of method has been always followed. So, for example, whatever we are reading and which we teach to our law students in our legal methods and the jurisprudence, they all will trace their origin from there. So whether you will look for people like those who talk about command on sovereign law created through that is starting from bonding and still going to law state. Okay, so 16th century onward till subsequently. And then even if there is some digression in people like Hart and all this kind of thing, Hart will not say that it is not state-centric, rather he recognizes all this idea on the basis of pathologies of it, rather than this idea that they are the ordinary person. Or from bottom-up kind of idea also, where norms are created, people like Kelsen and all this kind of thing, they also essentially talk about the same. So they end up ignoring all this kind of ideas, and the laws many times are not state-centric, and they always end up testing something on the basis of what we can call as which will not help in a descriptive understanding of the society. It is a kind of, you assume there are certain things and you won't be able to describe. And that's why empirically, anyone who wants to study society will fail miserably if they want from the point of, come from a vantage point of legal centralism, because this is not how society operates. Okay? I'm not going to what is good and bad, because there is good and bad about everything. It is not that secular laws are always good. There are so many things, and there's not much of violence which are committed through secular only. So many times there are religious norms and all this kind of thing, and they operate on individual. So they are not accounted for. Okay? And please don't think that, as I again gave an example, when you talk about this recognition and obligation and all this, and Hart is not treating them as a kind of nice thing to look into. He treats it as the pathologies of the society. Okay, so don't fall upon Hart for the purpose of justifying legal things, and because ultimately Hart is also a positivist, ultimately is state-centric person. So he thinks that these are the problems of a primitive society and all this kind of thing and all this. So we are not talking about those kind of ideas. We are talking about these ideas in a perfectly modern context, where multiplicity of influence will happen and people will have an influence over all this kind of thing. Okay, so cannot make your point unless until you talk. So of course, there used to be chalk, smoke, and some kind of weakness. But we moved from chalk to marker. Now we are saying it, then we don't have from marker also. Either we use electronically or you can take this. So, anyways, I will try to. So suppose I imagine there is a circle, okay? And circle actually will talk about what we can call as a boundary of society. And within the circle, draw a track. Basic mathematics we used to calculate what we say. When we draw a circle, triangle within the circle, you'll find certain areas which will be left out. There is no possibility that you can fill up a circle through a triangle. Okay? So there are certain things that will be left out. So when we are talking about circle, we are talking about circle as the boundary of the society. Okay? And this triangle is what we call as a state legal system. Okay? So this triangle will create what we call as boundary of law. So it is quite obvious that there are certain areas of the society which would be beyond the boundaries of law. And they are very much part and parcel of society because they are the things which exist in the society. Anybody who's more interested in reading it further from a different perspective, can look into writing of Chiba, okay, on whom government scales building further. So Chiba has talked about a kind of a, interface between society, law, and all this kind of thing. And subsequently, Professor Gordon Scale developed what he calls as a guide. So he talks about that to understand how laws will operate in a society, you cannot just go in a classical way of legal centralism. You'll have to understand it through kind of a kite model. Okay, so as we know that kite must be kept afloat, and for the purpose of keeping kite afloat and flying, you must be properly applying the balance. Unless until balance is properly applied, kite will not fly. Okay, so that's why he calls it a kite model. He has built up a reverse idea over here. So he says that on one corner of the kite you'll find human rights, on the other corner of the kite you'll find, say, international law, one corner of the kite you'll find, say, all this kind of politic laws, state laws, whether let's not use politic law because non-state law can also have politic law. So state law, and this on one end it would be having non-state ID. So certain conduct of the individual will be more influenced by non-state factors, and certain conduct of the individual will be influenced by more state factors, and so on. So in certain areas, you'll find that international law, human rights will have more influence. But you cannot say that individual is just influenced by one corner of the kite. If individual is getting influenced by one corner of the kite, then that kite would be flying. Okay, so he gives a very nice kind of figurative idea. Okay? So again, I will quote the statement which I have given earlier, that is 1772 regulation. So what it said, and I quote: in all suits regarding inheritance, marriage, caste, and other religious uses and institutions, the laws of the Quran with respect to Muhammadans and those of the Shastra with respect to the Gentus. So they have written not Shastra, they have written Shastra. Okay? With respect to the Gentus, shall invariably be adhered to. You know the Gentus in this. So it clearly looks for the possibility of a kind of multiplicity of laws which are applicable on the individual. Now again, I will quote a statement from Hooker where it says that recognition brings a special problem concerning the assessment of legal rules whose validity and content cannot be established. In the ways habitual to be operative a state legal system, with the consequence that recognition of bodies of written law, Jewish law, Hindu law, Islamic law, has always been less problematic than that of unwritten law. Decisions must be made concerning the possible recognition of indigenous tribunals applying local or broad customs. So, I don't know how many of you are knowing about this. That way, Israel is an interesting society because of the fact that in Israel, two sets of the court still exist. Okay? So there's a Supreme Court of Israel which deals with the non-Talmudic laws. That is the laws which are not of that is not coming from Talmud. It's Torah and all this. That is the and then there are other set of the laws with respect to family affairs and all this. The other court will have the family civil. Okay, and that's why Israel is an interesting study in different contexts also. That is many times the fact that Israel gets not much influenced by the Western ideas and all this kind. So the Supreme Court tries to accommodate Western ideas and one idea of law and all this kind of thing. Having said that, as I was saying earlier also that presently, not many of Western societies also are recognizing the possibility of multiculturalism and pluralism, although I'm using it interchangeably at this point of time. Subsequently, I will tell you that multiculturalism at this point of time, and we are not going to that. So if you actually see that why West started talking about this, because of the fact that they recognize practically all this thing exists. Okay, so many times we don't realize that is what I want to say, that more loyal to king than king themselves. So we are more Western than the Western people themselves. Okay? And then there is something called is not a starting point. Then it is when if it is starting point, that is okay. Problem is it becomes an end point. So that has influence. So we will still show that in those kind of time that something extraordinary is happening. Look into. So, for example, when it started happening and they realized it in a very concerted manner that we cannot work with legal centralism and we'll have to identify the idea, like say, post World War II, and as a kind of aftermath of post colonization, there was a reverse migration which started happening. So earlier migration was only one way migration. Okay, that is only European people were coming and going anywhere. Nice people. There was no possibility of reverse migration. Reverse migration, even if it was happening, that was out of compulsion. Indentured labor and all this. You don't have to follow. Yeah. But subsequently, because of some ties up which were developed and because of the fact that there was no options which were available, reverse migration started happening in a post-colonial. So, for example, in France, people realized that not many of Algerian Muslims started living. Algerians, most of their star football players are actually are also so very significant. Then what they started doing? So what started happening that they have this idea of Islamic law. So and then there was this only one option because as a matter of fact that France initially started with a very kind of this idea of laicite and all this kind of thing, very aggressive idea of secularization of society and all this. And because of all this, what started happening, this set of the people started ignoring the formal state legal system. They created a kind of what we can also refer as an alternate dispute resolution. Everything was going underground. They used to get their disputes settled among themselves. They were not going to the court. Many times, what happens that most of these disputes will get settled and nobody will go to court. But in cases, as I said, that Minsky, because Minsky talks about personal law a lot, I won't be able to go into that in detail. Different trajectory. So you can read Minsky's write-up on this. So besides not many of instances where suppose in England also, people will say go for divorce and separation through Sharia. So what is the mandate if somebody ends up challenging the secular court? Okay? Same kind of things have happened in United States of America also. So these are the things in our context in which we are interested. What it is essentially doing, it is actually challenging the possibility of there is one state globally which will settle all the disputes, and that is getting challenged. So judges in England more specifically are very much aware of this idea that if you go for a very top-down kind of approach, it would be difficult, and people will just start ignoring everything. But at the same time, given this very Western European idea of state being central to everything and all this, so they're trying to reconcile all this. So they will accept all this, which has been settled through all this Sharia ideas and all this kind of thing, and try to give it a shape of as if it is done in a secular. So it means what? It's not a strong form of legal pluralism for sure. It is a weak form of legal pluralism because so when we talk about weak form of let me get it sorted out first and then I'll come back, and that is weak form, the strong form of legal pluralism. So when we talk about weak form of legal pluralism, so one is legal centralism. That doesn't recognize the possibility of multiplicity of law. Okay? So that is different. Then there is pluralism, which can be weak form of legal pluralism and strong form of legal pluralism. So weak form of legal pluralism will say that okay, we are recognizing the possibility of multiple laws, but ultimately recognition also is coming from state. Okay, like say customary laws are getting recognized by the state. This is legal pluralism, but it is a weak legal pluralism because they don't stand on their own. You assume that customs are operating because of the fact the state recognizing. So those kind of ideas. In Indian context, as a matter of fact, that personal law has a unique standing in peace market. I hope that all of you must be clear about this, but personal laws and not many people think that on 13th, custom is written and personal laws are covered under custom. No, completely. Personal laws. So, and even Sarah Bano case, which not many people quote, Sarah Bano case at no point of time actually decided that case. They decided on different ideas. So till date, basic idea which this is when we got charge of longer input, segregating the input is continues. That is, personal laws are not law for. So it is not stated. So in those circumstances, you are recognizing. But at the same time, you are assuming that they are allowed to continue because of the fact that state allows them to continue. So in that way, still state is becoming much more central than a strong form of legal pluralism. In a strong form of legal pluralism, you don't rest your legitimacy from state itself. You rest your legitimacy from society itself. Okay, so that is something which is very important to actually appreciate. Okay. So again, I'll quote one of the statement of Griffith to emphasize one thing and then I'll come back. So it would be a complete confusion to think of legal pluralism in the weak sense as fundamentally inconsistent with the ideology of legal centralism. That is what I was saying. That it would be wrong to assume that it is completely going against legal centralism. The reasons which I have gave. Okay? It's merely a particular arrangement in a system whose basic ideology is centralist. Still, you are saying that we are legitimate because of the fact that state recognizes us. And that's why we will. So still it is centralist. Okay. So the very notion of recognition and all the doctrinal paraphernalia which it brings with it are typically reflective of the idea that law must ultimately depend from a single validity source. Legal pluralism is thus but one of the forms in which the ideology of legal centralism can manifest it. Okay. So here we are not talking about legal pluralism in the sense as kind of a very progressive or very strong form of legal centralism. So here it appears as if it is also one of the forms where legal centralism actually accommodates legal pluralism. So that won't be a kind of an ideal situation. Okay, so we'll go to one layer and come up with a different diagram. That is
Yeah.
so. This is Popsicil's theory of legal levels. Popsicil is one of the person whom you will find. Pospisil, Pospisil, and he talks about theory of legal levels. So by the time I get bored, let me go and put him. So no society argued has a single consistent legal system. So police says that no society argues has a single consistent legal system, but as many systems as there are functioning subgroups. So Pospicil's model a particular way in which legal pluralism manifests itself in society he calls as legal levels. Since the legal system forms a hierarchy reflecting the degrees of inclusiveness of the corresponding subgroups, the total of the legal system of the subgroups of the same type and inclusiveness, that is like family, lineage, community, and so on and so forth. This is what it calls as legal level. So legal system can be viewed as belonging to different legal levels that are superimposed one upon the other. Okay? Various legal levels they are superimposed upon one another. The system of more inclusive grouping applying to members of all its consistent groups. So that is what he calls as legal. This is how old ideas and new ideas are not voluntarily accepted, they are compelled upon it. So this is part for the good. So if you're using PowerPoint, everything is all supposed to fall in place. If you're not using PowerPoint, this kind of structure will appear. This is how society also acts with this process. So there is another person by the name of M.G. Smith. So M.G. Smith has built up this idea of legal pluralism on the basis of what is called as theory of corporations. So please mind it that corporation we are not talking in the sense of companies and offices. Their corporation actually is a kind of a corporate personality. Yeah. That is this idea of legal personality, where a group of association and all this thing. So corporate is not getting used in a sense as we understand. Okay. So see, auspicious begins with the question, what is law? And seeks to answer it in the terms of social groupings of which anything likely to be called as a society uh, uh, consists. Smith, on the other hand, begins not with law but with politics, okay, for which he seeks a descriptive theory usable for comparative purposes. Okay, so that is the idea of this corporate, different from what Posterson was talking about. Okay, that is here. This coming from this idea of society as we talk. Okay, we are looking into so descriptive idea. So why is this descriptive idea I'm talking about again? Because of the fact that so if you go and come up with this kind of normative idea about kind of how laws operate and what law is, and go to the society and find that it won't be able to explain so many things. Okay? So you won't be able to describe. So what you end up doing, you want to fit in the scheme of things as you understand it. Okay, try to just box it in. Okay, and you clearly won't be able to describe so many things. Whereas you see it from the perspective of society, you will be able to empirically justify so many of things. Okay, so here the possibility of empirical justification is much more than what is there otherwise. Okay, so under those kind of circumstances, like say, although we cannot rely much of completely on GFK, so you must have heard about GFK. That is this ordering of things and all this kind of thing. The St. Jude's on GFK where he talked about the ordering of the things and normative and all this kind of thing. So Gerke was also talking about this kind of idea, but of course, Smith is going much beyond what Gerke was talking about. Gerke was ultimately about normative ordering. And normative ordering, when Gerke was talking about, that influences the modern Japan ideas also of how the legal system operates. That is ultimately you will see that over there would be an ordering of norms. So under those circumstances, you won't be going for legal rules. You will end up having a legal centrism. That's why I clarified that when Smith is talking about those kind of ideas, corporation and all this. So she is not coming. She is not coming from the from the vantage point of DFK, that is normative ordering thing. That is whether she is looking into all this from the perspective of society. That in society there are multiple groups. Okay, so politics also here is not politics, party politics. Okay, politics is as people organize themselves in a society. Okay, so you will find various kind of guilds. You can very well find kind of in context of India, and lot many of scholars actually end up talking about very strong caste-based corporations also. All this kind of thing. I said at the onset that we are not going into all this kind of issue. That is a different thing. That whether essentially all this kind of things are always good or not or bad, or rather bad and also misunderstood. Why I'm doing this whole, I'm not talking about this otherwise also because of the simple reason that, as I said earlier, that even secular laws are not necessarily always good. So you cannot just say that just because of the fact that you find something problematic. So in a way, we are coming from the communitarian perspective. People like Michael Walzer and all this kind of people, when they talk about the community, many times the laws which are coming from community are much more effective than many laws which come from state because of the fact that there are so this market that even if you go for kind of very classical understanding of Austinian or Benthamian idea of this idea that there has to be a sanction. Again, it is wrong to assume that the sanction always comes from state. Rather, lot many of sanctions which are coming from non-state player are much more forceful, much more coercive than the sanctions which come from the state. So in cases of sanction also, there is no such golden rule that only if the sanctions are backed by state, then they are only effective. If that is the case, then why you are supposed to move contempt petition and enforcement of decree and all this kind of thing. So that is one of the idea that we look at from the perspective of just sentence. So that is very largely idea of law. Okay, it is not the idea of law as law is. It is a very kind of seen law from the perspective or lens of a lawyer. That is for a lawyer, law is effective only if you are able to get an order from a judge. Okay, that is the law which is effective. But for the purpose of society, that is not the understanding. Law can be effective in so many other ways. Not necessarily for a judge, it can matter. That is, what are the things on the basis of which I can base my assumption and can result into something where there can be sanction and there can be coerce. But that is an idea which is a learned idea. It is not an idea where we can just engage with the idea of law as such. Law as such can trace its sanction from one person from so many of other ideas also. So in those kind of circumstances, uh, uh, the other thing which we must take note of is this again coming from Smith only, that is parallel to the distinction between types of social and constitutional structures. Smith distinguishes between three levels of modes of pluralism. So one is cultural pluralism. Okay, so cultural pluralism consists solely in institutional differences to which no corporate social differences attach, only institutional differences. So what appears to have in the mind here is the case in which the corporate boundaries determined by one sort of institution do not systematically correspond with those of other institutions, so as to divide the society into more or less hermetically sealed off segments, each with their own set of congruent institutions. Okay? And this interpretation is also, I'm quoting in this quote, this interpretation is reinforced by the ensuing definition of social pluralism as the condition in which institutional differentiation coincide with the corporate division of given society in a series of sharply demarcated and virtually closed social segments or sections. So cultural pluralism is compatible with uniform incorporation. Okay, social pluralism is associational incorporation, but is not necessarily accompanied by cultural pluralism. So finally, structural pluralism institutions or presupposes social and cultural pluralism together, and it entails difference in incorporation. Okay, so I hope that this is clear. Okay, so uh, let me draw this. Corporate boundary, and then there is incorporation. Corporation as well. So one is uniform. So can be again divided into multiple. Second is again there would be so this is Smith's model of social legal pluralism.
So what is the second?
Associational. Association. So corporate boundaries, one can be corporation after it is uniform, then there would be group of the people who come and form, and there is associationalism, and then there is a differential idea. There will be different and all this kind of thing, and these are the boundaries of society and law. That is what Smith would be talking about. Okay? And then there is another person who is also talking about all this, and I hope that you will be aware about having more than Smith, Eugene Ulrich. Okay. What was the idea of Eugene Ulrich? What he gave? Living. So in a way, that's why it is a kind of uh, it allows for the descriptive idea of the and the legal pluralism. So for our purposes, the other thing which Ulrich emphasizes is more important. Ulrich very interestingly and very rightly emphasizes upon that law can be understood in two ways. That is one idea of law would be what Ulrich, and this is something which Ulrich says himself, that is rules of decision. And then there is second idea which he calls as rules of conduct. Okay. So rules of decisions, that is how you will decide. This is it will be counted. So that is not the only way to understand the laws. Okay? There is something called rules of conduct. There are so many other things which will tell you in what manner you are supposed to conduct yourself. Okay? Again, I am not going to value judgment right and wrong. That these are the other things. That is looking into laws are good or bad. We are not looking into that. Either the state-centric laws or other laws. Okay, that is not the discourse. That can be looked into. So that is also important to understand that there is no such rule where in say communitarian idea also where it says that bad laws are supposed to be. When society changes, society transforms. There is no such idea. Rather, in many cases, for example, one of the famous scholar of constitutional law, Mark Tusnett, he actually says in the context of where that is this small book that why constitution matters. He says that constitution matters not because it decides upon the laws. Constitution matters because of the fact that it decides upon the quality of it. What kind of quality is possible? Okay? Because through quality you make a negotiation. And he gives an example that and today at that point of time people must have thought otherwise, but today it is quite obvious. That is today a judgment of the Supreme Court can say that abortion is legal. Tomorrow it can say abortion is illegal. Okay? So that kind of fight. And for that matter, in cases of so many of other things, for example, constitution clearly in India also you find that clearly constitution interestingly creates an offense out of untouchability. Okay, so constitutions are not for the purpose of creation. So constitution has gone one step further. So kind of legal ordering which constitution does is a general kind of legal ordering, all generalized, not specific. Is a penal law which are supposed to. So constitution has gone overboard. But still, have you seen that untouchability has been abolished practically for all practical? So it has been able to establish only one thing. That is, what is the rules of this? That is, if somebody practices untouchability, if somebody takes that person to the court of law, the person would get punished. So for court, it tells what is the rule of the decision. But for the rules of conduct, still societies are there which are talking about so many things. In cases of say other things, in cases of legalization of homosexuality. Okay? So in that context, again, in US, again, Mark Tusnett writes that initially, not many times, and that's also important to understand. Even if there is a rule of decision, in cases of many of the abstract ideas, not many of signals comes from the society. Okay? So courts are also not oblivious to this. Okay? Court sees into the signals which are coming from the society, and even if there are no changes, because of changes in the society, the language and the interpretation change. Okay? So when rule of conduct are getting rule of conduct also influences the rule of decision in so many times. For example, we have not changed the constitution, have not done away with this idea of socialism from the preamble of the constitution. But after 1991, we have gone for a market policy. I mean, none of the recent court has said that it is voluntary. Multiple challenges. So in cases of rule of decision, the rule of conduct signaling is. So in that context, for example, Mark Tusnett was saying that why for so many years in US courts were actually not striking down the law against homosexuality, because the fact that society was not. And subsequently, society started realizing that we have been unfair to homosexuals. We have been hurting their dignity, and then courts started releasing it, and courts started striking them down. So that is quite obvious in so many of things. Okay, so when it comes from society, okay? So that's why this idea of political association and corporation becomes important, because they are the sites from where you will get signal with respect to that what is the rule of conduct which is acceptable to the society. In addition to the rules of decision, the rules of decisions are quite explicit. Over a period of times, they may also change, but rule of conduct is something which keeps on sending signals to the society that what is right, what is legitimate, and all this kind of thing. And more so in cases of so many of other things. For example, if you see the preamble of the Constitution also, Indian Constitution, it also recognizes its limitation with respect to what laws can do. For example, if you see that initial things, it says that states shall insure all this kind of thing. Whereas when it comes to the fraternity and all this kind of thing, it says that states shall promote. Because state cannot insure all this kind of thing. Fraternity, dignity, and all this kind of thing cannot be beyond a point, can be insured and can be enforced by the society. So even if there is a rule of decision, as I said, But practically in society, what will happen? And that's why for proper understanding of the law, it is very important. And that's why empirically, when you're trying to understand a society, you'll find a lot of a mismatch between law, which is state-centric law, and the law which society accepts as a law. Okay. And that is what this descriptive people actually talks about. Okay. And all this kind of thing, and they also talk about the famous statement, which all of you must have heard about, law being organic, like language and rules, and all this kind of thing, which happened in time of codification, that how codification can be done and how codification cannot be done. So, as a matter of fact, that despite of Germany being a next door neighbor to France, codification was not much delayed, almost for 94 years, based on this idea only that you cannot just decide what is a good law and in a top-down manner you can influence the society. You have to understand what society is, and ultimately laws they are completely state-made laws are completely. So what we are arguing at this point of time, in other words, we are suggesting something which is just opposite of what we agree, and that cannot be denied because all said and done, we'll have to also acknowledge that over a period of time, state has become very powerful. Okay? State has the authority and the power and the resources to take decisions in a top-down manner. And what many people also realize is that many times top-down decisions are also, even if they're not enforced, they're important for the purpose of signaling. That is, you actually want to send a signal, what is the right thing to do. Even if society is not following it over a period of time, you assume that because of signaling, you bring people there. So law necessarily not every, even from the perspective of state-centric ideas also. Law essentially are not always for the purpose of deciding on the rule of decision. Many times it encourages rules of conduct. Also, that is what is a rightful conduct. So that is what even state-centric laws also do. So under those circumstances, for descriptive understanding of law, that is, it is the legal pluralism which is of more help rather than legal sentimentalism. Because legal sentimentalism will leave out significant part of the understanding of the society. Because as we were talking about that, draw this, that is, there is a circle and then there is a triangle. So these are the boundaries of law, and these are the boundaries of the. The significant part of the society works beyond the boundary of law, and that is what laws are. Otherwise, also to give a very common example, law does not operate in most of the areas. Okay? For example, one fine day, state decided to say that smoking at public places is an offense. So prior to that, anybody who was smoking in public place was not punished. Okay, or his act was or her act was not punished. Okay? So that is what. So most of the times, these are the areas which are governed by the society. If there is a wrongful behavior, society thinks is a wrongful behavior. People are discouraged to indulge into those kind of behavior, even if laws are there. So always the boundaries of society will have a significant area which are beyond boundaries of the law. And this is the tick off time. But this is the four-side model, which Minsky talks about. So on one side, there would be state law, there would be non-state law, there would be ideas like human rights, there would be ideas like international law. So you cannot just, if you just keep on pulling one side, and that's why it's called a kite. So the whole idea is to make a kite fly, to keep that kite afloat. So as a matter of fact, even if you're not float kite, as a matter of fact that if you just keep on pulling one side, kite won't be able to. So the balance has to be maintained. And it also depends that where you are. So these are the areas where it will be rare, where all will have an equal influence. So this is how practically pluralism operates. Okay, it is not that pluralism actually means that state will become oblivious. This might be. We are not going to the other side. Pluralism, because please understand that pluralism, in a very kind of basic sense, only the pluralism actually assumes there are multiple set of laws, okay? And one law is state. So pluralism, unlike state law, which says that state law is most important, pluralism will not deny that state law doesn't matter. Okay? Unlike the state law, where state law says that what matters is state laws, nothing else. These are all aberrations, and over a period of time, you are supposed to ensure that the only state law will deal with everything. Unlike that, pluralism cannot say state law does not exist, because that would be again the basic grain and the idea of pluralism. But it will at the same time suggest that it's not only the state law which matters. Okay, it depends where you are. Okay, so for that matter, if you are entering into your private ceremonies like marriage and all this kind of things, state would get very if at all it is there. Okay? And it will allow not only for the purposes of, so for example, we'll say in India, let us take example of Hindus. Among Hindus, also multiple set of ideas are recognized by the state. Although that is an idea of weak pluralism because their state is recognizing all this kind of thing, and that's why it's a weak pluralism. They don't exist irrespective of state sense and whether it state recognizes that idea. That is, there are multiple ways to intend to marriages and all this kind. And that's why this basic idea of uniform civil code and all this kind of thing is against and considered as an outdated idea across the world because we have moved beyond that. So uniform civil code was reflective of this idea that ultimately law has to be state. So unless until state backed and state authorized, there can be nothing. And what the famous English scholar like Branberry, he famously said that laws are supposed to be uniform in their application. Okay? And if there are exceptions are also uniformly applicable. Okay. Whereas pluralism recognizes that laws are never uniform in its application, and there were so many of exceptions, and there will be no uniform application of exceptions. There's so many things. For example, your constitution. Unlike US Constitution, our constitution does not allow you to carry arms. It clearly prohibits. It says that peaceable assembly. You have a right to assemble peacefully. Unlike US, when it says that militia has a right and they can bring their arms for public places and all this kind of. Of course, it is because of the history of freedom struggle and all this, and that is a different idea. And in our case, non-violence. So I'm not going there, but you clearly say. But at the same time, you clearly say that while talking about right to religion, right to carry Quran is clearly provided in the Constitution as a part and parcel of right to religion. It is an arms. Quran, without any doubt, is supposed to be an arms. Even in Sikhism, it is not supposed to be just a decorative piece. The whole idea in Sikhism was that you are supposed to carry an arm along with that. And Quran is that idea. Okay, it's not that they're saying that it's just figurative for the purposes of just showing that you are there. So it was supposed to be an arm which you are supposed to carry along with you. Okay, so but still it allows. So those kind of, for that matter, traffic rule, helmets, and all this kind of thing. You say that turbans, or those who are wearing turbans, are not supposed to be a helmet. So people like Bradbury and absolutely state-centric kind of law-making people will say that no. If you say that helmet is required and you have found a logic that why helmet is required because it ensures the safety of the people, so it doesn't matter that whether you are Hindu, Sikh, or Christian, or okay, you are supposed to be in it. And market is not an Indian issue. Before it actually arose in India, in Bradford in the United Kingdom, this issue arose. Okay, and they also allowed an exception for Sikhs. That is it. Okay, so in that case, commentarian people like Akhil Bilgami and all this, they actually say that it is not that you are diluting the idea of law as such. Okay? The whole idea is that you are supposed to take everything into consideration. So you're taking everything into consideration and then try to see. For example, he also, for the heck of argument, says that somebody, so the young kids, they say that our stand quotient is affected by wearing helmet. So, you know, as a matter of fact, that you must have seen that unless until there is a traffic constable, most of the young people, they don't want to wear the helmet. So that is an idea. So the idea is this, it affects our style push. So those who believe in pluralism, they will say that don't keep that out because there is a significant number of the society who believes in this idea. So take that into consideration, weigh all those things and see that whether this is a legitimate consideration. So anybody who will legitimately weigh all those things will agree that style quotient is less important than religious beliefs in a society. So they're not saying discount anything. So pluralistic lawmaking is not discounting anything. It's just weighing things. So pluralism will not mean that whosoever says whatever you are supposed to accept it. That is not the idea of pluralism. Please understand this. It's not that that is anarchy. Okay? We are not talking about anarchy. Anarchy is a different idea. Okay? We are talking about an idea that this is an organized society. Okay? And there is a multiple ideas of the law. So when there is a multiple idea of the law, you take everything into consideration, but that doesn't mean that you accept everything. None of the society, even as a caste society or religious community and all this, they don't accept everything. There are so many of discourses which keeps on going. Very recently, you must have read that one of the very influential Archbishop in Kerala, he has been asked to leave his office because of the issue of that how masses are supposed to be offered in church. That is this idea that whether you should be facing the general public or you should be facing altar. So it is not that there the rules are made without deliberation. People are talking about this. Okay, they'll find an idea with respect to that, how you are there. So of course, whether good or bad, they decided that, okay, there would be an authority, and they decided that in the light of all this, the better way is to look towards alter. Okay, so there is a possibility of changing position in all those kind of discourses. The only thing is this, that state won't be central to that. We assume that there is no progress. That is wrong to us. So there are so many things. So in cases of uniform civil code also, we assume that societies will not change. As a matter of fact, as an aside, there was a study which has been done by a law professor by the name of Rajkumar way back, 60s. She studied around Pune. And she found that this having more than one wife is more prevalent among Hindus than Muslims. So it is not that just because of the fact that there is a possibility, society will not change. There are things and all this kind of thing which are there. And for that purposes, uniformity, for the heck of uniformity, is not a value. For example, let us assume this agreement. Let us talk about this agreement, because this is one of the ideas which Sri actually challenges to. That is having uniforms. We know, as a matter of fact, that significant part of the civil code is uniform. Because contracts, you are supposed to, whether Muslim, whatever you are, you're supposed to interpret contract in the same manner. Only in the cases of personal laws, it is none. And we don't recognize that among personal law, about Hindus also, it is not uniform. There is multiplicity. So if uniformity is itself a value, you say that Sharia would be a law applicable across the a Bible would be a proposition applicable across the platform, or you say that one school of Hinduism will be applicable across the platform. You will end up achieving uniformity. But would it serve anything? So uniformity, for the heck of uniformity, is of no use. Okay, if uniformity itself is a value, then you can attain uniformity by doing that. You say that every marriage in India would be entered as per the Hindu rights. It would be uniform civil code with respect to marriage. Every divorce has to be entered as per the Hindu law or Islamic. We don't do uniform civil code. We don't realize many times that what we call as a secular law may not be. Okay? Because marriage as a contract is a Christian value. It is not non-religious. And today, not many people talk about that. Oh, in Middle East, not many people are talking about Friday being declared as holiday. How regressive they are. People don't realize Sunday as a holiday in its origin is religious. It's not secular. Over a period of time, or for that matter, evidence law, confession, what it is, what logic it has, except for the fact that you assume that there is a Gaudai declaration. What value it has? It's not logical. Because logically, Bentham and all this kind of criterion will tell you that people are supposed to maximize their pleasure and minimize their pain. So if by telling lie, I can minimize my pain or get some pleasure, I will tell a lie. Okay, so that is an idea which is there. So on what basis you are assuming that no, when it is a hearsay evidence, it has to be admissible. So you'll have to also understand that secular laws in its origin are not secular in that sense that it is based on some independent logic and all this kind of thing. So one of the leading scholars of constitutional law, Gunther Frankenberg, actually says in his book that if you read the Bill of Rights, it has a huge correspondence with the Ten Commandments. And he says that if it is a coincidence, it is too much of a coincidence. So you thought, so what actually happened? That state laws, which what we today treat as state law in most of the European societies, they were not in the sense that you set together in the light of what Socrates was talking about in Platonic discourses, that what is the right thing to do, and talking about Athenian society and all this kind of stuff. That is not how laws were framed. There was a basic idea of Christianity, okay, which was predominant in most of the European societies. And most of the laws which were there were white, male Christian, and the idea of it. Even in Christianity, it was not women-centric laws. It was white, male Christianity. Okay, and they were converted into secular laws. And because of the fact that majority, although that is also, so if you're very interested, there is a book which clearly traces back at how not much of atrocities has been committed in Europe also for the purposes of doing away with uniformity. Darkly is the name of the book. Is Christian destruction. Has been written by lady who is a Christian. some other person from other side is trying. So what I'm trying to suggest, by its very nature, whether it is naturally existing or human behavior or nature in general, uniformity is not a natural. Diversity is natural. So wherever you find uniformity in India or maybe other societies now, and that's what I'm saying, that what we end up doing, for example, you have a law because of the fact that England had those laws 10, 20 years back. Now England has changed their laws, but you will not change it. So that is one of the problems. For example, evidence, electronic evidence. We have based our law of evidence, electronic evidence on section 5 of UK law. By the time we came up with law in 2000, on the basis of law commission's recommendation of England, they have abolished their electronic evidence act. And our law is continuing. So now they have realized that, so in Europe, uniformity was achieved because of the fact that, as I said, that not many of violence happened during dark ages. So there is no such history recorded in history of all. This is not that Europe one finally became a kind of monolithic kind of society. Not many of violence became. So much so that I could go and visit any of those European societies or European countries, you realize that all Roman structures were demolished. Greek and Roman structures were demolished. So much so. So, and when they started talking about all this kind of thing, it was quite easy because there was one only dominant idea. So you just have to follow what Christianity was doing. And if you actually read the kind of Roman law, you realize that it is origin from Christianity. That is, it has been hugely influenced by what they call as Jewish doctors. So they were actually saints, and they actually were interested in the task of framing laws. And they had a great influence in framing of Roman laws, which actually became the code subsequently, and that's why we say that civil law countries are influenced by the Roman laws. But Roman laws, as being codification and all this kind of thing, were influenced by church. So how evidence has to be recorded and all this kind of thing. These are the things how parties during a dispute must have to be heard. They have in root almost borrowed from what churches would do. So it is not that state has a different logic in a secular sense and all this. So even if you see it from the state-centric ideas and all this, it is not that it was based on some absolute philosophy and all this kind of thing, and then they started talking about which is applicable across the platform, and that's why it is a very beautiful law because all countervailing forces and claims and counter claims are accommodated. No, there was a clear cut dominance of one set of ideas, and then you created a law. So its origin also it is that is an irony. It is precisely tracing its origin to something which is now trying to decline and denounce. That's the origin. It followed the same things, which other people whom they are trying to denounce and decry, they are doing that. So this is the idea. So again, I'll quote something from Welch. So the compulsion which the judicial system provides is but one motive among the many which accounts for men's content. The order of human society is based upon the fact that in general legal duties are being performed, not upon the fact that failure to perform gives rise to a cause of action. That is not the reason for which. So, how many of you actually do something or form or feel that I'm obliged to do something because of the fact that you feel that if I don't do that, there will be a action? That is not how you conduct yourself. You have a different idea on the basis of which you conduct yourself. What is the right thing to do? In most of the circumstances, you base your conduct on the basis of something like that. Rather than thinking that, oh, if I don't do that, then somebody will take me to a court of law and I will be punished. So you are not basing your conduct on the basis of rules of discipline. That is how it will be decided. On the basis of this larger idea that what is the right thing to do. So the first and the most important function of the sociological science of law, therefore, is to separate those portions of the law that regulate, order, and determine society from the mere norms of disciplines and to demonstrate their organizing. So norms of discipline is just one part of understanding law. That is not the complete part of understanding of the law. That is the idea of that rule of conduct and all this kind of thing and how it is supposed to be done. So again, going further. So a man conduct himself, I'm selectively quoting of this. A man conduct himself according to the law, chiefly because this is made imperative by his social realism. In this respect, the legal norms does not differ from the other norms. So it is also a norm, as in the social norm. So if This will affect your conduct. Other norms are also affecting your conduct. Okay, that is the idea. The state is not the only association that exercises coercion. There is an untold number of associations in society that exercise it much more forcibly than a state. So he writes that in 1936, okay, at page number 63 to 64. Okay. So the imperial existence of a legal norm is only definable in terms of inner order of association. Again, I quote, rules of conduct are social facts. The resultants of the forces that are operating in society and can no more be considered separate and apart from society in which they are operating. Then the motions of the waves can be computed without considering the element in which they move. So that is, unless and until you take all this into consideration, you won't be able to actually. So another thing I will, because I'm running short of time. So there is let's say a lady by the name of Sally Moore. She wrote in 1978. So she talks about conception of semi-autonomous social trade. Semi-autonomous social trade. Even and even idea. And of course, as I said, that legal. So if you actually try to understand this, do read legal anthropology. And that is becoming more and more on everything you'll find. Not only with respect to things like marriage and personal laws and I'm talking. For example, you'll find that how judges act in a particular society. That is also greatly influenced by legal influence. That predicts judges' behavior, what should be judicial conduct and all this. So everything which you read otherwise is also covered by legal anthropology. And in a way, they are better able to explain so many of things which maybe so-called state-centric law is not able to explain. That is the idea. So she says, and I quote, that in terms of semi-autonomy, the fact that it can generate rules and customs and symbols internally, but that it is also vulnerable to rules and decisions and other forces emanating from the larger world by which it is surrounded. So internally you can generate, and you are also influenced by surrounding. It's society, law internally and society. The semi-autonomous social fields has rule-making capacities and the means to induce or coerce compliance, but it is simultaneously set in a larger social matrix, which can and does affect and invade it, sometimes at the invitation of persons inside it, sometimes at its own instance. The genetic problem of fields of autonomy exists in tribal society, but it is an even more central genetic issue in social anthropology of complex systems. All the nation states of the world, new and old, are complex society in that sense. And there are multiple semi-autonomous institutions which exist, and they also influence those kind of ideas. So this is what will also, so this would be a loose idea with respect to selling this idea with respect to boundaries of society and the boundaries of law. Okay. There will be boundaries of law, and then there will be boundaries of society. So, so in that sense, I now talk about Griffith. Griffith is one of the person who has, in modern sense, has written a lot on legal theories. You can also look into his writing on Journal of Legal Theory, John Griffiths, Griffiths. So Griffith says that what is legal pluralism? So legal pluralism is a concomitant of social pluralism. The legal organization of society is congruent with its social organization. Legal pluralism refers to the normative heterogeneity attendant upon the fact that social action always takes place in a context of multiple overlapping semi-autonomous social field, which may be added, is in practice a dynamic condition. So this is how the basic idea of legal pluralism is. Are there any things which you want to ask? I will talk about this in context and all this.
Double.
Well, I wanted to ask how multiculturalism is related to legal pluralism.
Then I will talk about this next. I will try to explain it in the same sense of that how India has tried to balance between strong pluralism and weak multiculturalism.
When they have.
Thank you, sir, for drawing inferences of ideal legal pluralism. So my question is, with respect to a idea that you quoted, that is the French Lasset. Mariam Hunter writes about it in detail about various forms of secularism that are present. So my question is, how do one balance the idea of secularism with legal pluralism? And I'm talking it in the context of the hijab ban in the Karnataka state public institutions.
So, so in comparison, when I talk about religion, I never use the term secularism or inclusion. Whenever I talk about law state, that is how is the interface between law and state. Because secularism is one idea to understand. And that is not the only idea, and not necessarily a perfect idea. Because what secularism does, secularism actually, and secularism is something which is anti-pluralism in its origin and its content. Because it actually primes one set of the value more than other set. And not necessarily. For example, one of the reasons, and one even in the original society, it was not so logical because we said that this Treaty of Westphalia and all this kind of thing, and then this kind of Versailles Treaty and all this, which led to so many of things and how church and state are supposed to behave. So then this idea was that there was a lot more of strife between church and the state, and that's why they wanted to take care of all this. But you will go and see origin of all this. So 2 letters on toleration by John Locke. So John Locke actually is not saying that religion is problematic as such. He's just making out a case for tolerance. Okay? And that's why John Locke letter is not addressed to the state. John Locke letter is addressed to the citizens. Okay? So that is the idea, because he realizes it comes from citizen, not from the state. Secondly, even if we go and accept that idea that because to do away with violence is not factually correct. And Professor Nandi actually says, Professor Ashish Nandi says that the greatest amount of destructions have happened during 2 world wars. And those world wars were essentially fought between nations which were Christians. Essentially all the same. So it is a myth which has been created. It is a religion which creates friction in the society. It's a religion because of this violence system. Because whatever were not fought on it. So if you want to fight, you can find so many. So you can fight religion on the basis of religion. You can find if religion is not there, then you can find on the basis of resources, so on and so forth. Okay, so not necessary. Russia and Ukraine is not fighting because of religion. Both of them by and large follow Orthodox Christian. So this is the basic, and that's why there is a nice book where again that lady was first while nun. That's why she is not a person who is coming from some other side and talking about all this. So she also says that, and she says that nicely. She talks about this Elizabeth Colbert. She actually talks about that. See, you must have heard about a word called scapegoat. You know the origin of this word, from where it comes. So actually, there is a practice in Jerusalem that they bring 2 goats. Okay, they sacrifice 1 goat to say that all evil has been taken care of, and then in sacrifice ceremony, the priest will put his hand on the other goat, say that all problems of our society starts from this goat, and they allow goat to just escape. So literally, religion is you assume that you are transferring everything of that as a matter of fact. So he also says that you can actually see the things. It is not the religion which has corrupted the politics, it is the other way around. It is the politics which has corrupted. So that is that. So in that case, also, if you actually see not many of people, so Jean Bollocks has also written on this, very in context of French laicity. So actually, if you see one discourse started happening, that all religious symbols are bad. You won't be talking about religion in schools. So he says that this is not neutral to religion. This entire religion activity. So LAD filed a complaint saying that for 5 days in a week, and the system says that you on the holiday you can take your kids to the church. We are not stopping you, but during school hours, they have nothing to do with it. So he says that you are not being religiously neutral. For 5 days in a week, you are teaching kids that religion is problematic. So secularism is not neutral to religion in those kind of systems. Secondly, this idea of why we started moving towards secularism and all this kind of thing, and why it was appealing, because of the fact that initially science started providing answer to certain things. There's a lot many things like Srinivasa in Indian context talked about secularism. So, although that is also a problematic idea, not necessarily every society becomes secular only through secularism. This at least the classic. Although it is regressing now, but during Ataturk time, it was not through process secularization. So you thought that religion is problematic. Why people were attracted to religion at the first place? Because it was providing answers to so many of them. Although subsequently you realize that they are non-scientific. So you started saying that okay, you are suffering because of the fact that you must have done. So you're not getting kids because of the fact that you're not you've done sin. So sin in the past life. In the present life, you're a nice person, then you must have sinned in the past life. Okay. Then blaming lady and all this for not getting son and all this. So science started telling that that is not the case. It's purely scientific. Whose chromosomes decide whether it could be boy or girl and all this. So science started providing. But over a period of time, you realize that science has its own limit. For example, science now has equipped you to clone people. But whether cloning people is the right thing to do or not, science cannot provide. Still, it has to provide it by questions of morality. So now you are realizing that you started, so that's why not many people say that science didn't replace God. Science became a new God. Okay? Whatever is science, you assume it is right. But as a matter of fact, you realize that science has been always shifting. Okay? Science has not been a static over a period of time. Very recently, you realize that what WHO said with respect to COVID, that is not respiratory disease. And by the time everybody got it, they said that oh, it is. Suppose just think that if some person from religion would have done that, said, oh, religion is regressive and all this kind of thing, they end up doing harm to everything. It's not based on any logic as such, it is based on prejudices. That you assume that religion by its very nature. So that's why Michael Baldwin also said that why community is bad. For example, why even if well, there should not be any problem with respect to association based on religion and caste, because state cannot take care of every individual, every needs. Most of the time, society provides solution. So he says that it becomes problematic only if you start so. There's no problem if you live together, provide people during the time of their penury and abject poverty. Where is the problem if you're helping your castemen or fellow religious people? At least you are helping someone based on this association. You will not help anyone if you are not based on this. It becomes problematic only if you start throwing bricks on the people who believe in other ideas. Then it becomes really problematic. So believing in a particular or belonging to a particular community of religion or caste per se may not be a problem. It becomes problematic if you start hurting dignity of other set of the people or harming them. That is, somebody from other religion or other caste comes to your locality, you start throwing bricks. Then it becomes harmful. So that happens with respect to nation state also. Nation state is what? It is collectively coming together for the purposes of sharing the proceeds of the resources and welfare. That is the whole idea of nation state. And that is the idea which has been expanded in the context of European Union also. That is, you do away with the custom excise boundary. We have been fighting about all this. So we'll come together. There would be surplus which will be generated and will indulge into welfare of everything. So same is the logic, whether it is caste-based idea, religious-based idea, or nation-state idea. Logic remains same. Only it will become vast. Now, if you are talking about human association as such, so if caste boundaries are bad, say other boundaries of nation. And that's why Rabindranath Tagore actually criticized the idea of nation states a lot. And he believed in the idea of humanism. Aurobindo also believed in the idea of humanism and all this kind of thing. Because nation states also are problematic. Because then you say that, oh, you cannot get citizenship of our country. Whether we will take you as a refugee or not, we will decide. So you're not basing your idea of what that you should help fellow human beings. So the logic remains same. Here you are helping your own castemen, own religious fellows. Here you are helping your own citizens. But it is based on the idea of exclusiveness. So if the idea of exclusiveness is bad at the first instance, it is bad at the second instance and third instance. So there is nothing to distinguish between exclusiveness on the basis of a religion and exclusiveness on the basis of secular ideas like nation states and all this. So that is the basic idea.
Any other question? Okay, sir. I have a small question. I was thinking that every human being desires to make other human being similar. And this desire or anxiety to make everyone similar, one tries to develop a uniform kind of mentality, or a mentality where everything appears to be same, just like a product is produced with a similar pattern, similar structure. And this particular anxiety may impact in the displacement of local languages, because every language consists of so many diverse values. And when languages are displaced and languages are centralized, and by that centralization, they create institutions like a state and all those legal fictions, and through which we try to perpetuate the value of uniformity, certainty, what legal positivists try to do. So whole legal centralism idea revolves around this particular anxiety to make everyone same. Don't you think?
Yeah, so I don't know whether you're aware of this or not, but one of the reasons, so we'll actually see Reddit campaign, you must have heard about something called Bendy Banana. What was Bendy Banana idea? That is for the sake of uniformity. So since there is a common market, so nobody should get an advantage or disadvantage. The same set of the ideas are supposed to be applicable with respect to farm produce. So bananas which were banned were not allowed to be sold in European market. And they, in England, they started saying that this is what. So, of course, subsequently they withdrew that ordinance. They call it not ordinance, ordinance. They subsequently revoked that. But this was one of the ideas. So, people go to extreme kind of length for the purpose of creating. So, this just based on this basic human side that you are not comfortable. So, what are prejudices? Do what you make. Human prejudices will not make. Because of a simple reason, otherwise it will become impossible to act. Because if you want to act in a manner which is completely informed, act, you won't be able to act ever. You will become indecisive. So prejudices allow you to act. Okay? So you try to see that, okay, under this circumstance, this will happen. This will not happen, actually, in that circumstance. But it allows you to make decisions. So these are all prejudices which are there, which makes the human decision more viable. Otherwise, it would just become a kind of indecisive thing. Okay, this may also happen, that may also happen, take this information, also that. And just think about present scenario. We are not living in cocoon where one community doesn't know what other community is doing. You can have information with respect to so many things far. So there's so much of information available. If you are allowed to take a decision on the basis of ideal set of the information, you won't be able to take it. So this is a big decision. For the sake of convenience of operation, you do this. There's no other logic for that. Because it allows you to operate. That is, what is the logic in this? So that is what we call as game theory is this only. So if you want to read, you can also read versus book, Republic of Belief. There he engages with law, idea of law. That is, law is based on this idea, Republic of Belief. Calls it as the Republic of Belief. The same Cossack was Republic. So he says that, for example, in airport, for the purposes of the fact that you know that in airport they are meeting. Because it takes away the possibility of other inconvenience. So whosoever wants to meet someone will go there and they can meet that person. He said that you work on this Republic of Belief. Okay? And if you don't take that into consideration, your decisions will become ineffective. Because other person is working with that setup. Okay. So the very kind of a very easy example which he gives is that suppose there are two Japanese who are supposed to meet at 2 o'clock. Okay? So both of them will come at say 1:45, 2 o'clock, both of them will meet. Then two Germans who are supposed to meet at 2 o'clock, both of them will come at 2 o'clock and go and meet. The two Indians who are supposed to meet at 2 o'clock, both of them will come at 2:30 and meet and go. Problem will arise if a Japanese and Indian are supposed to meet. The Japanese will come at 1:45, will wait at 2 o'clock, leave at 2. Indian will come at 2:30, Japanese has left by that. So nowadays in conferences also, in Germany, if you go for conferences, they say that they specify. They say that whether time is relaxable or non-relaxable. The relaxable is not as per the Indian standard. Relaxable means that 5 to 10 minutes they will allow. If they say non-relaxable, 2 means 2. If you don't arrive at 2, they will not allow you. So this is what Republic of Belief is. So laws actually create Republic of Belief and they say that why law does not operate? Because you don't take into consideration the societal belief system. That is what it is. For example, if you say that, oh, road safety and all this. So if you don't take the actual factual situation into the mind, the laws won't be affected. So road accident you want to avoid by safety rules. So you say that drive in one lane. But you realize that there are so many potholes. So of course, people won't be able to drive in one lane. So any traffic rule which is not taking this into consideration will be problematic. It won't be able to avoid the accidents and all this kind of thing. Okay. So that is the idea. So why left hand drive, right hand drive, left lane drive, right lane drive? Based on this idea. Otherwise, you will never know from where any person will come. So it creates a predictability, nothing else. There's no other logic for that. Very well, you can say that. So in Europe, you drive on the other side for the purpose of avoiding accident. In India, you drive on the other side for that. So there is nothing sacrosanct about left or right. What is predictability is sacrosanct. You want to create, otherwise it will become kind of too much uncertain. And human minds are very uncomfortable in dealing with uncertainty. Only entrepreneurs are able to deal with uncertainty. That's why entrepreneurs, it's a difficult thing to do. Otherwise, most of the common people are okay with jobs, knowing fully well that you won't be able to prosper as much as an entrepreneur will prosper. But for that, you must be able to deal with uncertainty. The same human side. That is, people are uncomfortable in dealing with uncertainty. So it describes everything. This is a process of doing that. This is a process of doing that, because you never know what else will happen. So there's no other logic for that, except for this. But in case of pluralism, what we are saying is this, that let us not create a kind of one monolithic structure. There can be significant number of the people, they can have a different idea about certain things, and they can very well then manage their affairs with those. That is what we are.
We were talking about the distinction between weak form of legal pluralism and strong form of legal pluralism. Can there ever be a strong form of legal pluralism? Because one way or another state will provide sanction only then.
So that is a kind of a, to a certain extent, that is said that is a kind of trap, because states have become so powerful that, so it's a kind of, again, the thing that that is elephant in the room. You cannot ignore it. The state is so powerful that you look for state approval and all this kind of thing. At least, even if not an approval, at least some other fact, at least they should not say that what you are doing is illegal. For that matter, what is so sacrosanct about this idea that bigamy should be an offense? This is essentially a Christian value again. It's a Christian value. And they say that it is democratic. What is democratic about that? You are enhancing the chances of everyone to get a spouse. So it essentially means that you are assuming that everybody should marry. So I can understand you say that forceful marriage is illegal. If voluntarily, if people want to have multiple spouses, where is the problem? But many times law actually ends up doing certain things because they assume that if we don't make bigamy an offense because of certain ideas, it will always operate against women. So that is a different idea, that laws, even if they're uniform, they don't operate in with it. So for example, if you say this, where is the problem? When women are allowed to work day and night, but whether societal conditions are such that if women will feel safe to venture out in night, in Delhi, even men will not feel safe. Okay. So under those circumstances, laws are on both. There's no such prohibition, you cannot move out at night. But because of other consideration, you don't move out at night. So that law will only remain on paper. You won't be able to create equal opportunities. So you'll have to. So if you just think about laws only talking about that rights we have created rights, and that will take care of everything. You know how society operates. Then this law will be miserable. That is the idea.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you for delivering this wonderful lecture. And we are eagerly looking forward to another lecture tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you.